Is the Beowulf really worth of a trigger warning?
Beowulf. Well, now, I had to study Beowulf, and of course, a trigger warning has been applied. This is an Old English epic poem on many English literature courses, but Aberdeen University have now put a trigger warning onto this, and the academics are worried that students may read about, quote, monsters, and have put more than 30 warnings on the module entitled Lost Gods and Hidden Monsters of the Celtic and Germanic Middle Ages. Now, Toby, this reminds me of when one university put a trigger warning on Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, saying that it contained scenes of graphic fishing.
There was an even more absurd one, which was a trigger warning put, I think, on Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
Yes.
Apparently some children, not children, but some adults reading the book, studying it as part of a children's literature course, I think at Bath University, might have been upset by it.
Right.
And to me, it's so ridiculous because, one of the purposes of reading these books, if you properly engage with them and your imagination is engaged, then you want to be slightly traumatised.
Right.
You want to find them slightly scary. And, that's part of... You want to go on the journey vicariously with the kind of hero and feel what he feels. But without feeling that kind of engagement, you don't have the full literary experience.
Well, I mean, which university was it that put a trigger warning on 1984? Which sounds like they're trolling, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
But they did that.
Aston University?
That rings a bell. They said something like, it contains disturbing themes. I'm like, well, it's a dystopian novel. I don't expect it to be uplifting.
Yeah.
And if you're in English literature, and there was another one, there was a great one, they put a trigger warning on Robert Louis Stevenson's novel Kidnapped, saying it contains kidnapping. So, I mean, and that's already built into the title, guys.
Often the kind of underlying theme of these books, particularly books aimed at children, is you have to confront your fears.
Yeah.
You can't hide under the bed, your entire life. Part of the rite of passage of becoming an adult is confronting your fears. And they're saying to these students, no, remain infants, don't confront your fears, be warned, stuff in here may be frightening. So it defeats the whole point.
That's the point, though, isn't it? Because, I mean, we can mock trigger warnings. It seems like one of those silly culture war stories that doesn't really matter. And you might say, well, it doesn't really matter if you put a warning on the thing. But I think it's what it suggests about the mindset. It's basically infantilising adults. It's saying we need to look after you. And it's patronising, ultimately, I think.
Well, I think it's even deeper than that. It's a clash, ultimately, of ideologies. I mean, we talk about these stories every time. It's a new trigger warning. We laugh at them, graphic fishing. Obviously, they're absurd. But what is behind it, really, it's a clash of the English tradition of free speech, civil liberties, all these things, versus this new ideology. That's what it really is. And it's not racial, by the way, but Carl Benjamin did a good speech about this. It's to do with our tradition, which is free speech. Anyone can come here, obviously, and enjoy that tradition. And, of course, the whitest possible people at the elite universities can be the opposite. They can be total communists. So it's not racial, but it does seem to be a tradition that we've all grown up with, which is why we laugh at it and why we say it's absurd, which is a tradition of free speech and civil liberties, all fairness, all the things we recognise, versus this new ideology. And that's why it keeps happening. And I'm almost sick of talking about these, because every time it's a new trigger warning, we laugh at it. But this is going to keep happening.
We don't address the problem. I suppose it's not censorship. That's the key point. It's not censorship. But what it is doing is it is signalling the idea that words are dangerous. Yeah. And that's a dangerous trajectory, because that then changes the mindset. And
it's also significant that it's Beowulf, that it's a classic English text.
Yeah.
It's a bit like when people attack Churchill, which, he wasn't perfect, etc., but it's attacking fundamental things about a certain culture.
Also, how can you study English literature if you're not prepared to encounter troublesome things? I mean, Beowulf, the Old English, foundational text, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, you go forward to the Middle English, that story revolves around a decapitation. But if you're choosing to study literature, shouldn't you be expecting these kind of things?
Yeah, and to think that, students, who are adults, after all, aren't psychologically equipped to deal with this kind of traumatising experience is so patronising.
Yes.
And the emergence of trigger warnings and safe spaces has gone hand in hand with the kind of mental health crisis amongst adolescents and young adults. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think protecting them from any kind of trauma, trying to create a kind of cocoon of safety around them, leaves them unprepared to deal with the day-to-day conflicts of ordinary life.
Well, also, it's my understanding that cognitive behavioural therapists all agree that the very worst thing you can do if someone is suffering from trauma is to shield them from any references to that trauma ever again.
Yeah,
it's the opposite of what you should do.
It's the opposite of what you should do. It's a point that Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt make in The Coddling of the American Mind.
Yeah,
we're far too overprotective of young people, and it has the opposite effect. It doesn't make them any stronger. It just makes them more and more weak and vulnerable.
But you're being too generous. You're assuming they want to help young people become stronger, and they're overprotecting them. But, of course, what they're doing is imposing their ideology. It's leftist extremist professors imposing their ideology. That's what I believe is happening. Because
Okay.
they're not actually trying to help the students.
Well, yes, but that's mind reading. You're thinking about what their intentions
And I
are.
am correct.
Okay. You are very good at that whole mind reading thing. Quite astonishing.